Hey everybody, and welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. So glad on this episode to be talking with comics creator Brent Schoonover. Brent, thank you for jumping in, joining me, and thank you for the very cool studio space that you're currently sharing.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's cool to be here and hopefully give some good insight on what it's like to be a comic book creator, comic book artist.
Love it, love it. I'm looking at all of the inspiration around you. I believe that's a creature from the Black Lagoon mask
Yeah,
back there. We have
yeah,
Batman, Dick Tracy.
yeah.
Um,
I'd move it around and give a whole thing, but I'm afraid my whole setup would go real clunky and we'd be doing this all over again. But yeah, it's a lot of. Dick Tracy was one of my original favorites. I remember going to see the movie, and the first and only time
mhm,
this ever
mhm.
happened was outside the movie theater in the lobby. They had comic books ready for you to buy after the movie, and I made my
Love
dad
it.
buy all three comic books, and I was a huge fan. I grew up in Illinois, where Chester Gold, who created Dick Tracy, he wrote the Star Tribune or Star Tribune, Chicago Tribune was the
Mhm.
where he worked with and worked at, and so yeah, kind of always had a. He was one of my first, one of the first creators I really kind of like latched onto and kind of followed a little bit. Eventually that kind of moved into comics, but we'll get into more comics here in a minute. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, love that. I've read kind of the brief bio on your website of being a kid in the 80s that got connected to comics. So I assume that's the Warren Beatty movie where it's like, is that Al Pacino? That's Al Pacino. I assume
Yeah,
that's that one. Yeah,
that
yeah,
was a lot of fun.
yeah.
Yeah, it
I
was
also
absolutely that
love that.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
The bright colors, it kind of looked like a Tim Burton movie. Obviously made sense because the Batman movie did so well that I think there was, whatever they could kind of get out there and,
Hmm.
but yeah, it was like a comic book come to life. So it's a lot of fun. I recently rewatched it with my daughters and, they had a good time with it and I'm glad to see it held up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So in the world of comics, what do comics allow you to do in the stories that you want to tell and in the way that you want to tell stories?
Well, I mean, that's the fun part about comics is that like you don't have to have a budget. Like a movie has to have a budget.
Hmm, hmm.
To make a Captain America movie, you're going to need millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. For comic book, you can put them in outer space. You can put them in World War II. You can put them in a coffee shop ordering a coffee, and it all costs the
Hmm.
same. So there's this great ability to from there's no budget concerns. There's really only the limit of your imagination a little bit. And
Hmm.
honestly, it's really funny is that sometimes drawing the smaller scenes where two people are interacting and having a real emotional moment is the harder scene or harder part to draw than say Captain America punching the Red Skull or Baron Zemo or any of that. Like you draw that stuff a million times and you're like, I know how to do that. But to draw somebody really having a tough moment, like a real something relatable to the reader, you got to make sure you really convey that. So I would say that, that's kind of what drew me in is, just that you could do anything on a piece of paper that you want have in your brain and it doesn't really cost you anything. It doesn't really need you to, I mean, if you're doing your own comics, you don't really need a writer or anybody, but it does help when you have really great writers and colorists and stuff to work with. So yeah, there's no real limitation, I guess, is what drew me to comics.
Love it, love it. And you mentioned Captain America there, which is a very neat segue into talking a little bit about a collaboration that you just recently done, and that is with Alan Gratz. And he's a big name here where I am. I live in North Carolina,
Oh,
and he's done some school visits in various areas, and kids just like remember him stopping by because
yeah.
I believe he's pretty local to North Carolina. So curious about what it was like to work with him and to work in the world of Cap.
Yeah, I've learned Alan's a big name everywhere because we did a little book tour after Captain America came out, and holy
Mhm.
cow, I remember we were in Atlanta, Georgia on the night of the college football national championship earlier in the year, and we were worried. I'm like, no one's going to show up for this thing. Everybody in Georgia is going to be watching the Bulldogs win the championship, and it's like a random Monday night. And it was our biggest crowd. It was awesome. We were at a public library. They had a really nice seating section and stuff, and we filled it. And it was great. So, and I give a lot of that credit to Alan, because he's just had an incredible book run on his teen lit books that have really got kids excited about reading. That was one of the coolest things too, was just seeing kids come up to him with all these
Hmm.
books about history and what they loved about his books, and listening to that. And to say, me and Alan, we talked a little bit during the making of the book, but we didn't have a huge conversation. I'd get the script, and we had about 5 or 6 editors involved between Marvel and Scholastic. So there was already a lot of people involved, and Alan was supportive and he'd give his 2 cents, but we didn't have a ton of conversations till near the end, when we started talking about promoting the book and stuff like that. And we did a few Zooms together, and we got to kind of know each other. And then we finally met each other for the first time when he and I met at the airport to get a ride to our first speaking event. So that was kind of funny. But
Hmm.
he's a great dude. He loves comics. He knows so much about comics. And it was such a natural fit to have him do a World War II Captain America story. And he was
Hmm.
able to do that well, but he was also able to add a really fun little Marvel moments, like Marvel Universe moments, and add characters and little nods that if you're a fan, you really can pick up on, but they're not so much that if like you're a new reader, you won't have issues with the story. So for his first book that he's ever done, a comic book, I thought he nailed it out of the park in that regard. And yeah, it was really fun. And I hope we get to do it again, because I know where he would love to take the Captain America story next, and it would be a blast to do.
Yeah, fingers crossed for that, because that's such a, as a teacher, it's such a great collaboration to see this author that students read, and the
Yeah.
world of comics and the work that you do kind of coming together in that way, history and comics and all the
Yeah.
things. So
I
it's
just
great
got a
to see that.
joy. I just got a joy of doing it, and then like going and seeing a room full of kids excited about comics.
Yeah,
I love going to comic conventions. I love fans doing signings and stuff like that. But you kind of get used to like guys my age in their early 40s, like
right,
kind of
right.
showing up with their books. And that's great. I'll take any fan I can get. But when it's a young kid and you kind of see them around the age you were when you started getting into it, really, really awesome. And they ask really fun questions,
Hmm.
and they really got into it. Our little Q&A thing. And so, yeah, it really sparked an excitement for the industry that I've always had an excitement for the industry, but it's something I hadn't done in a while. I hadn't really worked on a book specifically for younger readers, so that was really fun.
Yeah, yeah, and it's that passing of the torch, because
Yeah,
somewhere out there among those children coming to see you will be, the one day creator of whatever the property happens to be, Captain
for
America
sure.
or whatever
Yeah,
story it becomes.
I hope so. I really do.
Yeah, yeah. So I usually like to ask about like a best collaboration, best experience. I was going to ask about Batman 66, because that just happens to be one of my favorites. But you've done a lot. You've done Ant-Man, Dark Horse Presents, a wide range of material and work. So you're welcome to tackle this next one in whatever way you like, either
Yeah.
talking about Batman 66 or some other experience that you've had in your work that's been especially positive.
Well, I'll talk quick. I'll get to Batman 66. I'll talk quick about Ant-Man, because I really, really did love doing that. And it's so funny because when people ask me about Ant-Man, I always say, like, hey, if Marvel had asked me like 3 or 4 years before about doing an Ant-Man book, I would have said, like, who did I get mad at Marvel? Who did I make mad at Marvel to give me an Ant-Man book? Because it used to sort of be kind of a kiss of death sort of thing. I've always thought the character was interesting, loving old sci-fi movies. The Incredible Shrinking Man is like a really cool movie to me, and
Hmm.
the possibility of doing something with that size and scope. But never a character that felt really high on the hierarchy of Marvel characters.
Hmm.
And I just got so lucky to have an opportunity to work on him and have the book literally come out the week the movie came out. My Ant-Man annual came out the week of the movie. There was so much interest in the character. Paul Rudd's awesome. So it
Hmm.
was really crazy to just be like, oh, I'm working on Ant-Man as he's like going to be the coolest he's ever been. And so that was super fun and perfect timing. Going to Batman 66, it was so much fun. I remember watching that show on, I think it was Nickelodeon would play it, I think at Nick at
Mm-hmm.
Night, maybe when I was
Mm-hmm.
young. I don't remember exactly what channel it was, but it was not always on. Like you could, accessibility to it wasn't as easy when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And it always just was captivating to me. The bright colors, the cheesiness of it. Like I knew it wasn't like Tim Burton's Batman, but that's kind of what made it stand out. It was so different and
Mm-hmm.
weird. And I just kind of really dug it. I was always a big fan of like watching the monkeys as well. So it kind of fit in with those two things. And so Jeff Parker, a friend of mine, he was up here at a convention here in Minneapolis. And I was just kind of driving him around and we went to dinner and stuff. And he's like, man, I owe you for, driving me around this weekend. And he's like, would you want to do Batman 66? And I was like, yes. And so he asked me what character I'd love to do. And I've always been a big Vincent Price fan. I love his movies. And so I was like, I'd love to do Egghead. And so I got a chance to do Egghead and it was super fun. And we got to drop in like Mr. Freeze in there. And then I got another chance to do when after we had done all of the original characters who appeared in the show, the editor at DC was like, we need to start doing other characters just to sort of keep it exciting. And so
Mm-hmm.
Jeff asked if I wanted to do one with Solomon Grundy. And I was like, absolutely. And he's like, well, what would you base him off of? Like if he was from the show? And I was like, well, he'd look like Lurch from the Addams
Mm-hmm.
Family, And
Mm-hmm.
so got to do that. And just a lot of fun, really a lot of fun. Those were like early motion comics too that DC had done. So we kind of had to layer them a little bit. And there was a little bit of layout stuff that was a bit of a challenge, but they really looked nice on the app when you kind of flowed through them. There'd be
Mm-hmm.
panels that popped up and disappeared. And I wouldn't say they were animation, but the movement was kind of fun to do. And I had just started working digitally myself. So that was kind of like a fun way of kind of learning how to do digital comics and stuff like that. So yeah. And I will say my closing thing, Ant-Man and Batman 66, I think I'm still the only artist who's ever done both Eggheads, the one from Marvel and the one at DC.
I
So
love it. Love
if
it.
I don't accomplish much else in my comics career, hopefully I can say that. If I'm not the only, I'm the first. So
That's a milestone,
yeah,
definitely.
there we go.
Yeah. Jeff Parker has gotten attention on the show before. He's been on,
Oh,
and
nice.
yeah, I talked with Doc Shaner a few episodes ago, and he was also very appreciative of Jeff Parker. So,
Yeah, Jeff is, Doc and I are good friends too, actually. We don't talk as much as we used to just because comics keep us all busy and
hmm
COVID
hmm
and stuff like that. I don't think we've been able to sync up from a convention standpoint, but yeah, Jeff was kind of a glue for getting a lot of us guys kind of into each other, probably in the early Twitter days when we were kind of just meeting and kind of figuring things out. So he's been a great guy for that. And he's still a good friend. He always texts me randomly, like late at night, because he's on the West Coast, and I don't even know what it'll be about. But next thing I know, I'll be spending the next 30 minutes talking about something random with Jeff Parker, and I always look forward to it.
Nice, nice. And I will echo what you said about Paul Rudd as well, because perfect guy to play Ant-Man.
He
He
really
made
was.
Ant-Man cool in the movies, and you had a lot to do with making him cool in the books at that time as
Oh,
well.
well, thank
So,
you.
yeah, absolutely. So by way of a final question, but we can hit anything that we might have missed. Always curious about like what's next in the creative journey, what creative visions you sort of have maybe in the future, or world that you'd like to create in that you haven't
Yeah,
created
yeah.
in yet. And I always like to ask about where readers can go to learn a little bit more as well.
Yeah, coming out of Captain America, I just had such a really fun time uh, promoting the book and seeing kids getting excited about comic books that it was sort of my first book. My Marvel stuff is definitely kid friendly, but it can be
hmm
difficult if you're not reading the monthly books on some of them to be able to jump right in. I really loved having a book that you could, know nothing about and just be able to jump in. And so, it's amazing how you have a plan. And so my plan was right after Captain America was done. to start doing a creator-owned book for myself that was based off of my daughter, who's big into skateboarding. Every week she'd go to a group called Girls Skate Club, and it was really just inspired. I was a very terrible skateboarder when I was a kid, but I really loved it for like a year. And it was really fun to see these girls who didn't know each other, didn't go to the same school, but every Wednesday they would get together, and for 2 hours they would just skateboard. And they came from different walks of life, and I just really got inspired by like, wow, this is just so fun. And the instructors were amazing. And so I'm slowly plotting away a project on about that. I don't have a timetable for it, but I keep mentioning it publicly so it holds me accountable for it. I
Wonderful.
did have a really amazing opportunity with a writer from Marvel to do a project that I just couldn't say no to. So I'm getting a little sidetracked on that all ages, or not, I don't even say all ages, but probably middle grade graphic novel about my daughter's skate club to sort of do this venture. But yeah, I would love to continue to do that kind of stuff. I'm pretty lucky that outside of comics too, I do really fun stuff for a company called Roosevelt's, which is like a really fun t-shirt company, and they do licensed stuff for like Disney and Marvel and DC and stuff like that. So it's been pretty cool to like be randomly at the mall or something like that, and all of a sudden you bump into somebody who has this really fun button-up t-shirt with like your artwork on it, whether it's a Pixar shirt or like the Incredibles, or I did a Spider-Man meme shirt where the Spider-Mans are pointing to each other. Yeah, I've done Black Panther shirt. It's really neat. It's really cool. So hopefully got some more stuff in the pipeline with them that's going to be coming out real soon. And yeah, so I guess stay tuned, and you can find my artwork at BrentSchoonover.com. And I also have an Instagram that's at @bscooneyart. So yeah, I post on there as much as I can.
Fantastic, fantastic. I think we might have time for just one more question
Sure.
if you're up for it.
Yeah.
And this one was a little unscripted. It wasn't on the list, so you're also welcome to pass. But I was thinking a little bit earlier, you're talking about meeting young fans. So any particular interactions that you've had with a young reader that come to mind as being like the surprising moment or
Yeah.
one of those?
Yeah, when we were doing some Captain America press, I had a kid come up, and he was like, I just love, your artwork. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. Thank you. And then he proceeded to show me, he like redrew panels from the book. Like he was like, he's like, this is the greatest drawing I've ever seen. And which was like, oh my God, that's so nice of you. And his art was amazing. And so he gifted them to me. So I have them in a little envelope where I keep some of that kind of stuff. And he's got his information on it and stuff like that. And I really I hope he keeps it up. Like that's the one thing I love seeing young kids get excited about that. I remember when I first got my first comics and stuff like that, like when I started getting like Todd McFarlane books, like Spider-Man books, and I was just like, this is so dynamic and exciting. And just drawing it and kind of tracing it and just trying to figure out how he did it and stuff. And there was some really cool Hulk stuff that I was way into in the early 90s. And that's just how you learned back then, was sort of tracing or drawing or trying to see what how they did it and stuff like that. So to be one of those artists that somebody else has seen and kind of doing how I started out doing it, I thought that was really cool, and it made my day. And yeah, super fun.
Yeah, yeah, very cool. Very cool. Absolutely. That chain of inspiration that gets passed
Yeah,
down. Yeah.
absolutely. So
Yeah. Well, Brent, thank you so much. Did we miss anything that you want to make sure to share?
no, I just really appreciate you taking your time to interview me, and I hope people are excited for Alan's new book. He's got a new one about Pearl Harbor coming out that he just announced, and I'm looking forward to being able to announce projects for me soon. I'm in that weird stage where it's so close, but I can't quite
Yes.
talk about anything yet. So, but I'm working away at it. So
I'm sure you are, and I know that it would be hard to say no to Marvel and some of those characters and properties and co-authors and things like that. So absolutely looking
absolutely.
forward to that.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yep. Thank you.
All right.